Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be talking about my day-to-day activities as a contract project manager working at Walmart, and where possible, I'm going to show you the actual trackers and project plans that I created to manage these projects. And hopefully, this will give you a good idea of what PMs do and what kind of PM jobs are out there. Really quickly though, before we get started, if this is the first time you're seeing me, you should know that I've been working as a project manager for the last 8 years, and I've traveled all around the world working remotely as a project manager, and I even made $300,000 working remotely as a project manager, working 2 projects at the same time. So before I get into my day-to-day activities, I thought it would be a good idea to show you how I was approached for this job and the actual job description. Then we'll get into my actual role and what that looked like and what I was doing on a day-to-day basis. This all started from a recruiter directly calling me after finding me on LinkedIn, and the first call was very basic, where the recruiter explained what the role was and asked me what my experience was and wanted to know if I was interested and available for the role. And then from there, the recruiter reached out to me via email confirming a call with the hiring manager for the following day, and I confirmed and I also requested that they send me a job description so I can better prepare and better get a feel for what I'd be doing. So here was the actual job description that I was sent by the agency. And before I go into the details, I want to mention 2 things here. The job description was not created by Walmart. It was created by the agency and what the agency felt was required for someone to be successful in a role like this. And the second thing you'll notice is that the job description is very simple. In other words, it doesn't mention years of experience or specific qualifications. And I think the agencies do that for 2 reasons. One, they realize that those are superficial metrics. For example, having 10 years of PM experience versus having 1 or 2 years of experience does not necessarily mean you're going to be a better PM. And number 2, agencies will try and downplay the role so they can avoid paying much higher rates. If they were to show this role as a very senior role, they would likely attract candidates that would request $100 an hour or more. So they purposely keep the role simple enough to get the right people, but also to avoid having to pay very high rates. Now, the scope of this video is not to show you guys how to get the best rate, how to negotiate contracts or anything like that. It's just to show you the day in the life of a PM. Maybe later on I'll do a video on how to actually negotiate the best rates and get the best rates as a contract project manager. But for now, let's jump into the job description, and then I'll go over what I actually ended up doing and working on. The first thing they mentioned was that I'd be overseeing the implementation of various new projects, new stores, new conversions, and new remodeling stores, which didn't really tell me a whole lot. They mentioned I'd be working with internal stakeholders for the upcoming next generation store project, which again sounded kind of cool, but didn't tell me what that entailed. It mentioned that I'd be coordinating with multiple stakeholders and vendors during the implementation. Now, since I had experience working on other project implementations before, like during my time at Bank of Montreal or Canadian Tire, and having done lots of vendor management before, I had a good idea what this was going to be like. And lastly, they mentioned that I'd be assisting in the implementation and troubleshooting of e-commerce projects, which was called grocery home shopping. This point kind of made me a little nervous because I'm not super technical, but one of the things I've learned when it comes to applying for jobs is even if you don't fully feel like you're qualified for the role, just go for it anyways, because when you're in and you see what's actually going on, you realize it wasn't that scary or hard. And number 2, if there are things you don't know, then you'll be forced to learn them, and you'll learn them so much faster because you'll get practical feedback as you'll be doing these things directly on the job. So just a side tip, don't be afraid to apply and say yes to roles even if you're not 100% qualified. In terms of the skills that they were looking for, they mentioned that they were looking for communication, both written and verbal skills. And notice how this was at the top of their list. This is often the most important skill for a project manager. They also mentioned someone who's organized, someone who's sharp, someone who's willing to dive into problems and has a positive attitude, someone who can work in teams and work agile, which in this context actually just meant someone that could work on multiple things at the same time, someone who has familiarity with infrastructure systems, which, by the way, I had no formal training in any kind of infrastructure system before stepping into this role, but I did have some experience working on projects related to infrastructure in the past. They mentioned someone who has experience managing multiple vendors, which I did have, and someone with experience troubleshooting devices and systems, which I did not have. All right, so that was what they were looking for, and as you can see, I didn't meet all of the requirements, but I proceeded anyway with confidence, trusting in my ability to figure things out once I got the job. Now, what was my job actually like? What was I doing on a day-to-day basis? Let's get into those details now. First of all, I worked at Walmart from 2019 to 2023, and I worked on many different projects during this time. So I'll touch on some of the big projects and what I was doing on each of them. And one thing to note is that during my time here at Walmart, The tech team, at least the department that I was a part of, did not have a formal PMO structure in place, and so we didn't have a defined process for moving projects from different phases of the life cycle. It was more like, hey, you need to do this, just get it done. So the first project that I was assigned was for managing the implementation of new technology and IT infrastructure at one new retail store that was launching at the end of the year. This was different than all the other stores because this was going to be their next generation store with all the latest retail technology that they were testing. Things like automated out of stock shelf detection, things like in-store pickup with self-serve automated kiosks, and even automated robots for cleaning the floor. So they had all this new tech that they wanted to deploy in addition to all the regular stuff that they needed in the new store. When I got started, I was given an Excel file with a list of everything from an IT tech perspective that needed to be installed, some of the things I mentioned above, and then also regular store requirements like their self-checkout, their Wi-Fi, all the cabling and network ports that needed to be set up, their online grocery order system, and many other things. And my role here was just to work with the vendors and place all the necessary orders for the equipment that we needed to install, coordinate with the vendors on the timeline, delivery, and installation of those equipment, and work with our internal stakeholders like our construction, design, and infrastructure teams to make sure that these things were installed at the right time. And since this was a very fast-paced project, we had vendors going in and out of the store, electrical work being done, merchandise being set up in different parts of the store, and so it required working very closely with our construction team and our design team to make sure that our installation dates for the tech portion of the new store aligned with the overall work being done at the store. Now, this was a much smaller project comparatively, with only a budget of around a few $100,000. But about 4 months into my role as a project manager at Walmart, they handed me another project, this time for the deployment of their online grocery hardware infrastructure deployment across 400 of their retail stores. So for this project, I worked very closely with the business project manager, who was responsible for the overall communication with the stores and training, and I was responsible for ensuring the necessary tech like their scanners, their digital weigh stations, their computers, their Wi-Fi routers, cabling, and electrical outlets were all purchased, delivered, and installed according to the go-live schedule that was set by the business project manager. For each store, getting all the tech up and running meant that I had to coordinate with our network and security teams along with the vendor technical teams to get all the equipment online and connected to our core systems. This was the actual implementation tracker that I built to help manage this project, to help add some structure and clarity to the project. So I'll go through these tabs one by one and just kind of briefly touch on what the purpose of each of these tabs were. So the first one here is just I've got all these stores listed here and their go live dates, and then I'm tracking all the shipments that need to go out to the store and what the quantities are for each of the items that need to go out. So like, for example, the Zebra charger, the printers that we were sending over to the store, the thin clients, the PCs, and I was tracking if these were shipped. Here I'm actually tracking the equipment on hand, so I'm tracking the inventory that we have at our warehouse. I'm also tracking the POs and the anticipated equipment that we would have left over after we do these launches at these stores. Here I'm tracking all the purchase orders that I placed, both for hardware and for the labor, the services that we needed, like cabling and installation services. This is another tab that I was tracking for each of the Walmart stores that we were deploying, that we had to also install a backup battery, a backup generator, and just tracking if those have been shipped and how many we shipped and what their information are. Here I'm tracking the overall budget for the actual project, so how much we've spent to date and what that looks like line by line. Here I'm tracking some more budget details, and then lastly, just doing some forecasting for how much equipment we're going to need, how much we're going to have left over, and what the costs are going to look like. I also want to show you guys here briefly, in addition to that tracker to track the inventory and the shipments, I also created a implementation guide for each store that was going live. So if anyone was to come in and take over this project, they could follow this guide and know exactly what to do to get a new store up and running with online grocery shopping. And so this is an implementation plan showing how to plan for the inventory, how to plan for the budget, how the actual workbook is set up, the one that I just shared with you guys, what you need to be doing 7 weeks before the go live date, what you need to be doing 6 weeks before the go live date in terms of what you need to ship out and who you need to contact. So all those details were created by me, listed out here step by step. So anyone else, if they were to take over this project, could follow it along and get the same results that I was getting. So there you go, the two main documents that I was using to track this project to successfully deliver it and get it done for the company. The last and biggest project I worked on at Walmart was for the deployment of electronic price labels across all of their 400 plus retail locations in Canada. This project had a budget of over $40 million USD and had over 6 different external and internal vendors that I needed to coordinate with. I had to work directly with the vendor for procuring the electronic price tag hardware. I had to work directly with the vendor for procuring the fixtures that were needed before the electronic price tags could be installed. I had to work with the warehouse vendor to store all the equipment before it could be shipped out to the store. I had to work with the vendor who would actually go on site to do the installation of the fixtures and the price tags. I had to work with our internal legal and sourcing teams as we were dealing with tens of millions of dollars worth of contracts. I had to work with our development team in Walmart US to ensure that the software was properly deployed and set up for each store during our go live period. And similar to the online grocery hardware deployment project, I'd like to show you the actual plans and trackers that I built for managing this project. So I'm actually going to show you guys 2 documents here. One is the actual deployment and rollout plan that I built to go over the high level plan of the entire project, and this is what I presented to all these stakeholders. And then I'm going to show you guys the actual implementation tracker that I built to track every little detail on the project and the schedule. So in the deployment plan, I covered things like what is the project description, what are we trying to get done here, what's in scope, how many stores are we doing, what technology are we deploying, how are we deploying it, what's out of scope, what are we not going to be doing as part of this project, what does the high level timeline look like, when are we going to be deploying this technology into these stores, and when are we going to be releasing some of the new updates to these stores as well, what are the resource needs, how are we actually going to get this done, whose support do we need to do this, what are some of the assumptions that we know going into the project, what are some of the dependencies we have with other projects or other departments or other teams that might have an impact on our project success, what about the constraints of the project, are there anything that we may be limited by in the project that might impact our ability to deliver, what about any major risks that might impact this project that we already know about right now. I documented them and I shared them as well. What are the areas that we're impacting in the store? We're impacting the IT area, their data cabinets, we're impacting store product shelves, some of the processes. So what were the areas that were impacted? Who were the key stakeholders involved in this project? And then what was the project team consist of? Specifically, who was I working with? What were their roles and responsibilities? And then also a communication matrix. How often would I be communicating out with leadership, with the different stakeholders, with the different vendors, and how would I be doing that? And also I included it as part of the project plan, transition to support. How are we going to actually move over all the activities that the project was doing to a consistent, reliable support model that the business could then sustain later on. This here is the actual implementation tracker that I built to keep track of all the details and the timeline of the project. This first tab is just the project timeline, the schedule, and we had broken out our deployment into different phases. So if, we had a 15-store rollout, then a 37-store rollout, and then a 45-store rollout. And within each of them, all the activities I needed to get done in order to be successful in deploying this project. I had a rollout checklist. So we were checking for each store, had we done the specific things that needed to get done as a prerequisite to be able to successfully deploy each store. I also had built a rollout tracker to look at all the specific dates and the timelines and the installations and all the other interconnected pieces, making sure that this was all set up correctly. Also, I was tracking all these stores that were already live to make sure that we had a consistent list of all the stores that were already implemented with this technology. I was also tracking the inventory and the shipments and all the orders. Remember, we were dealing with tens of millions of dollars worth of inventory, and so all the information needed to be captured and collected and made sure that we had this available so we can reference it should we need it later on. And so I was tracking the inventory, tracking the deliveries, tracking the purchase orders, all very important to make sure that the project stays on track and we don't get left behind. And I mentioned that we're working with multiple vendors, so this was another vendor for all of the fixtures that we needed. So this one here is all the actual electronic tags that we were tracking, and then this one here with Tetraplast are all of the hardware fixtures that we were tracking that needed to go on the store shelves before we even installed the technology. And you can see there were a lot of different SKUs here, a lot of different parts that we were working with, and so with each new part, there's added complexity. There's inventories that we need to manage specifically for that item and make sure that the right amount is getting shipped to the stores. And so in order to do that, because I was managing the entire shipment as well, making sure that the right stuff got to the right store at the right time, I also had to create a shipment tracking tool to make sure that all the shipments were being sent out and that we could track them and that we could follow up to see if there was any delays. And so this was a shipment tracker that I also built. Also to keep track of stores that might have not received the full amount of equipment equipment, because remember, we were relying on the warehouse to ship the equipment, and sometimes they might make mistakes. It might ship 5 of something when we needed to ship 10, and so we had to track also the deficiencies and make sure that those were corrected. We sent them the right amount if there was deficiencies. Also, I was tracking the network portion of the deployment, so all of these stores, we had to configure the access points and configure the switches and the ports, and so I was tracking each one here store by store. And again, my job here was I was just tracking it, making sure that this was available. I wasn't actually doing the configuration myself. There you have it. This was at a high level the overall tracker that I built to make sure that this project was staying on track, that we were moving forward, that we were getting things done. And of course, this is just a small portion of it. There was a lot of other documents that I just don't have to share with you here, but this was the main tracker that I was using on a day-to-day basis to make sure that this project was getting done successfully. So there you go. You just got a behind the scenes look of what I did as a project manager managing tech infrastructure deployments across retail stores in Walmart Canada. Hopefully this has given you a better idea of what PMs do, what kind of PM jobs are out there. I do want to reemphasize that this role was a little different than traditional PM jobs in companies that have a formal PMO structure. In some way, those jobs are actually much easier because you have a defined process that you can follow to move your project along. In this role at Walmart, however, it required a lot more initiative, creative problem solving, and working in an ambiguous environment with essentially no rules or guidelines. As mentioned above, it was simply, hey, this is what you need to get done. Get it done. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. I'm actually doing something cool. If you're one of the first 100 people to subscribe to my channel, I'm giving away 1 year subscription to my community, my training program. You'll find the details on the link below. I'm also going to be making a lot more videos, and you're not going to want to miss them. So if you're serious about becoming a PM, like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.